Millionaire walked away from his pregnant wife over a lie. 5 years later, the truth about his Brot, a letter can be lost by accident. This one was signed for, scanned, hidden, and left inside a records box for 5 years, until a 64-year-old compliance officer opened it and realized a child had grown up without his father because someone inside a powerful company wanted the truth buried. Stay with this story, because the DNA result is only one of its revelations, and the final choice Charlotte makes will determine whether Ethan Mercer becomes a father or merely proves that he could have been one all along. If you believe ordinary people can stand up to powerful lies, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments whether you would open a letter that could destroy the life your boss had built. At 6:42 on a Monday evening, Martha Keene broke a company rule and saved a family from another year of silence. Martha was the senior compliance director at Mercer Holdings, a commercial real estate company headquartered in Philadelphia. She had spent 38 years learning that fraud rarely announced itself with a confession. It appeared in duplicate invoices, missing approvals, unusual access logs, and documents placed where no one expected to look. The company was moving old records to an off-site archive. Most executives had gone home when Martha noticed box 417 listed twice, once under vendor compliance and once under executive correspondence. Duplicate index numbers were not dramatic, but Martha disliked coincidences in record systems. She opened the box with another employee present, as company procedure required. Inside were old contracts, return mail, courier receipts, and a sealed internal envelope marked for Ethan Mercer's personal review. The envelope had been opened before. Inside was a certified letter dated 5 years earlier from Charlotte Bennett. Attached were hospital records showing the birth of a boy named Noah Bennett, a request that Ethan participate in an accredited legal paternity test, and contact information for Charlotte's attorney. The letter did not declare Ethan guilty of anything. It did not demand publicity or threaten scandal. It asked him to establish the facts, provide relevant family medical history, and discuss the responsibilities that would follow if he was confirmed as Noah's father. A courier receipt showed that the package had been signed for at Mercer Holdings by Vivien, Ethan's chief of staff. A handwritten note across the routing cover said, "Hold. Potential extortion. Do not upload to principal file." But the letter had been uploaded. A scan existed in a restricted archive, and the digital access history showed that Vivien had opened it 12 times before the file was hidden under an unrelated vendor code. Martha felt the familiar coldness that came when a small irregularity became a moral emergency. She did not call Ethan directly. She preserved the box, photographed the contents with a witness, notified outside counsel, and requested a litigation hold to prevent deletion of related records. If the documents indicated misconduct, friendship with the chief executive could not control the process. At 8:15 that night, Ethan Mercer entered a conference room expecting a discussion about vendor payments. He was 55, successful, disciplined, and accustomed to seeing problems arranged into manageable columns. Outside counsel sat beside Martha. A forensic specialist attended by video. Martha placed a copy of Charlotte's letter in front of him. Ethan read the first paragraph twice. Then he stopped breathing normally. "You found this where?" "In a misindexed records box," Martha said. "The original has been secured. We have reason to believe the correspondence was intentionally withheld from your normal file." Ethan looked at Vivien's signature on the courier receipt. "No," he said. Martha had heard powerful men use that word when facts first entered the room. Sometimes they meant the evidence was wrong. Sometimes they meant reality had become unacceptable. "Mr. Mercer," outside counsel said, "do not contact Ms. Hartley until preservation steps are complete." Ethan barely heard him. The letter contained a sentence Charlotte had written 3 days after Noah's birth. "Whatever you believe about me, the child deserves verified facts and the chance to know his medical and family history. I am asking you to respond through counsel within 14 days. Ethan had never seen it. For 5 years, he had told himself Charlotte disappeared. The letter proved she had knocked on the door. Someone else had decided he would not hear it. But the story did not begin with box 417. It began 8 years earlier in a bakery kitchen before sunrise. Charlotte Bennett was 38 and managing a neighborhood bakery owned by her Uncle George. Bennett's bakery had survived 3 recessions, a roof collapse, and George's insistence that customers could tell when dough had been rushed. George was 70 then, widowed, stubborn, and more interested in feeding people than expanding the business. Ethan first entered at 5:31 winter morning after a delayed flight and a sleepless night. He was inspecting a property 2 blocks away and wanted coffee before meeting contractors. The front door was unlocked, but the sign said closed. Charlotte emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of rolls. "You are either very early or very bad at reading," she said. "I saw the lights. We used them to see." He apologized and turned to leave. George called from the back, "Give him coffee. Anyone wearing that expensive a coat at this hour has made several poor decisions." Ethan laughed. Charlotte poured the coffee. He returned the next morning, then the next week. Their conversations began with buildings and bread. Ethan admired systems, scale, and efficiency. Charlotte believed some things lost value when made too quickly. "You would automate this entire kitchen," she told him. "I would improve capacity. You would produce 5,000 identical rolls that tasted like an annual report." He smiled. "You have strong opinions for someone using an oven older than both of us. The oven has character. So does structural risk." Their differences became affection. Ethan brought Charlotte to construction sites and explained how neglected buildings could be restored. Charlotte taught him how to knead dough and refused to praise his first attempt. George watched them with cautious approval. "Money makes some people louder," he told Ethan. "Charlotte needs someone who can become quieter." Ethan promised he understood. At 48, he had never married. His parents' divorce had been bitter and public in their small town. Ethan built companies partly because numbers felt less dangerous than intimacy. Charlotte recognized his fear, but did not treat it as permanent truth. They became engaged after 3 years. Ethan purchased a townhouse near the bakery rather than moving Charlotte into his glass penthouse. He said he wanted a home that felt lived in. When Charlotte learned she was pregnant at 41, she waited until closing time and placed a tiny pair of white socks inside a pastry box. Ethan opened it and stared. "Are these for a very small customer?" "They are for our customer. Delivery in 7 months." He sat down on a flour sack and covered his face. Charlotte thought he was frightened until she saw him smiling. They named the baby Noah because George said the name sounded like someone who could survive a storm. For several months, Ethan attended every appointment. He rearranged meetings. He asked the obstetrician so many questions that Charlotte finally took away his notebook. Vivien Hartley observed the changes from inside Mercer Holdings. Vivien had joined the company when it was struggling and helped Ethan build its executive structure. She was not merely his assistant. She controlled access, schedules, sensitive correspondence, and crisis response. Employees joked that no one reached Ethan without passing through Vivien's weather system. Her motive for removing Charlotte was more complicated than jealousy. For 3 years, Vivien had been approving inflated invoices from a facilities vendor owned through layers of shell companies. The excess money funded unauthorized payments and personal benefits. She believed the scheme was too well hidden to discover. Then Charlotte volunteered to help Mercer Holdings organize a community food market project. While reviewing donated refrigeration invoices, she noticed that one vendor charged the company nearly twice what George had paid for similar equipment. "Maybe commercial installation costs more," Charlotte told Ethan. "But someone should compare the bids." Ethan forwarded the question to Vivien. Vivien answered smoothly. "Different specifications. I will send the file." She never did. Charlotte asked again. She was not accusing anyone. That made her more dangerous. She had no political plan, no desire for office, and no fear of appearing unsophisticated. She simply noticed when numbers did not make sense. Vivien decided that if Charlotte became Ethan's wife and a permanent influence, the vendor scheme would eventually be exposed. She began constructing a different explanation for Charlotte's questions. She suggested that Charlotte resented the company and was using the food market project to build her own profile. She told Ethan that Charlotte had private meetings with Daniel Cross, a contractor who had once dated her briefly in her 20s. The meetings were real. Daniel was advising George on bakery renovations and bidding on the food market project. The affair was not. Vivien obtained photographs from a public site visit and cropped out the city employees standing nearby. She copied messages discussing the baby from a bakery expansion thread. In the original conversation, the baby was George's nickname for a temperamental antique mixer. Removed from context, the phrase appeared intimate. The final manipulation involved a draft vendor complaint Charlotte sent to Ethan's office. Vivien altered the attachment and added a false note suggesting Charlotte wanted money in exchange for silence. She delivered the packet to Ethan at the exact moment Mercer Holdings was negotiating its largest acquisition. "I do not know what is personal and what is corporate," Vivien said. "But you need to see it before she creates leverage." Ethan examined the images late at night. He recognized Daniel. He remembered Charlotte asking questions about invoices. Fear assembled the fragments into a story. Charlotte was involved with another man. The baby might not be his, and she intended to use both the pregnancy and vendor issue against him. He confronted her in the townhouse kitchen. Charlotte read the messages and laughed once from disbelief. "The baby is a mixer. This is not funny." "No, Ethan. It is absurd. Ask George. Ask Daniel. Pull the complete message thread." "What about the invoices?" "I asked whether the company was being overcharged." "Why is that evidence against me?" "Because the altered complaint says you demanded a settlement." "I never wrote that." Ethan showed her the attachment. Charlotte stared at it. "This is not my file. It came from your email." "Then compare it with the sent version. Call your information security team." Ethan should have done exactly that. Instead, he called Vivien from another room. She warned him that the security team reported to executives involved in the acquisition and that any internal review could leak. "Wait until the deal closes," she advised. "Protect yourself first." Ethan returned to the kitchen, already committed to delay. Charlotte saw the decision on his face. "You called her." "I called the person responsible for company security." "You called the person who controls the evidence." "Vivien has protected this company for 15 years. And I have loved you for 5. Apparently service to the company ranks higher." They did not separate that night. For 3 weeks, they lived inside suspicion. Charlotte produced original emails. Ethan said they might have been modified. Daniel offered to meet. Ethan refused, believing confrontation would create legal risk. George came to the townhouse and placed the old mixer's repair invoice on the table. "There is your baby," he said. "It weighs 400 pounds and leaks oil." The joke did not break Ethan's fear. Charlotte proposed an accredited paternity test after birth and asked both of them to retain independent lawyers. Ethan agreed in principle, then delayed every appointment Vivien considered inconvenient. One evening, Charlotte found him packing. "You are leaving before we test anything?" "I need distance until the acquisition is complete." "The acquisition has nothing to do with whether you trust me. It has everything to do with timing." Charlotte placed a hand on her stomach. "Noah will not delay his birth for your transaction." Ethan looked at her sharply. "You already chose the name?" "We chose it together." He had forgotten. That small fact hurt her more than the suitcase. At the door, Charlotte said, "You may have been shown a lie, but every day you refuse to examine it, the refusal becomes yours." Ethan left. Noah was born 5 weeks later. George stood beside Charlotte during labor. Ethan's attorney had withdrawn after a conflict, and all personal correspondence was still being routed through Mercer Holdings. Charlotte's lawyer sent the certified letter requesting a legal paternity test, family medical history, and discussion of support. Vivien signed for it. She scanned the package because corporate mail procedures required a digital record. Then she coded it as suspected extortion, moved the scan into a restricted vendor archive, and placed the original in box 417. She told Ethan that Charlotte had refused testing unless he paid a confidential settlement. He asked for the written demand. Vivien said outside counsel was reviewing it. He did not follow up. Weeks became months. The acquisition closed. Ethan buried himself in integration work. When he finally asked again, Vivien said Charlotte had moved, changed lawyers, and chosen not to pursue the matter. None of that was true. Charlotte waited through the 14-day deadline, then another month. Her lawyer suggested filing a parentage case. Charlotte considered it, but the bakery's landlord announced a major rent increase. George suffered a minor stroke, and Noah developed feeding difficulties that required repeated appointments. She was overwhelmed. More importantly, Vivien's office sent a formal letter accusing Charlotte of attempting to interfere with a corporate transaction. It warned that false public claims could lead to legal action. The letter could not lawfully prevent a parentage petition, but Charlotte, exhausted and outmatched, feared that any step would bring a corporate legal army into her son's life. She kept copies of everything. George recovered, though his left hand remained weak. At 71, he could no longer manage the bakery oven safely. Charlotte took over the business, renegotiated the lease, and created a catering line to keep it open. She brought Noah to work in a carrier, then a playpen, then a small chair near the decorating table. The bakery became his first world. He learned colors from icing, numbers from muffin trays, and patience from waiting for bread to rise. George taught him that broken things were not always useless. "This mixer is older than your mother," he said, pointing to the machine at the center of Vivien's false messages. "It has failed 12 times. Why keep it?" Noah asked. "Because we repair what still has good work left in it." Charlotte heard the lesson and wondered whether it applied to people. She decided repairs required willing hands on both sides. Absence was not repair. 5 years passed. Ethan's company grew, but the vendor scheme grew with it. Vivien became executive vice president and expanded her control. She assumed Box 417 would be destroyed during the record's move. Instead, Martha Keene opened it. The outside investigation that followed the discovery expanded quickly. Forensic specialists found the original scan of Charlotte's letter, access logs, altered vendor files, and payments connected to the shell companies. The evidence concerning Charlotte was now part of a larger corporate matter. Vivien was placed on leave after the board's special committee met. She retained counsel. Mercer Holdings notified insurers, auditors, and appropriate authorities. The company did not announce that she was guilty. It announced that an independent investigation was underway. Ethan insisted on driving to Bennett's bakery the morning after seeing the letter. Martha stopped him in the lobby. "Do not arrive unannounced," she said. "This concerns my child. It concerns a child who does not know you. Your urgency does not create his emergency." Ethan stared at her. Martha continued. "Contact Charlotte through her lawyer. Preserve her choice. Powerful men often mistake access for a right." He did as she said. Charlotte received the message while frosting a retirement cake. Her lawyer explained that Ethan had discovered the certified letter and requested a legally supervised path to testing. Charlotte sat down. George, now 75, watched her face. "He found it. Someone at the company found it. Does that make him innocent?" "No." "Does it make Vivien responsible?" "Yes." George nodded. Two truths again. Charlotte agreed to a parentage petition rather than a private arrangement. She wanted an official process, privacy protections for Noah, and a clear support structure if Ethan was confirmed as the father. Ethan consented to testing. Before the test, Charlotte told Noah that a man from her past might be biologically related to him. "Is he nice?" Noah asked. "I do not know who he is now. Was he nice before?" "Sometimes. He also made a decision that hurt us." "Did he know about me?" "He knew I was pregnant. He did not know you after you were born because a letter was hidden from him. But he also did not work hard enough to find the truth." Charlotte refused to give her son a simple villain when the facts were complicated. The cheek swab appointment lasted less than 20 minutes. The wait for the result lasted 12 days. At the family court hearing, the judge reviewed the accredited report and entered an order establishing Ethan as Noah's father. The judge addressed support through the jurisdiction's ordinary process and approved the parties' plan to consult a child specialist before any unsupervised parenting time. Noah was not present. Reporters were not allowed to turn the child into courthouse footage. Outside, Ethan gave a short statement. "Charlotte attempted to contact me after Noah's birth. Her letter was wrongfully withheld, but I also failed to verify what I was told. I will meet my legal and personal responsibilities. Noah's privacy is not available for public discussion." Charlotte watched the statement later on her lawyer's phone. "He said your name correctly," George observed. "That is a very low bar. Low bars still reveal who trips." The first meeting between Ethan and Noah took place after several preparation sessions with a family therapist named Elaine Porter, age 60. Elaine had spent 30 years working with children through divorce, adoption, and late parentage discoveries. "Do not tell him you have always loved him," she advised Ethan. "You did not know him. You may have loved the idea of the child you expected, but Noah deserves language he can trust. What do I say? Say you are glad to meet him. Say what happened in simple terms. Do not promise forever in the first hour. Demonstrate the next appointment." They met at the bakery after closing because Noah felt safest there. George sat in the rear booth. Charlotte worked at the counter within sight. Ethan entered without an assistant, gift basket, or photographer. He carried one small object, the original courier copy of Charlotte's letter, sealed in a protective sleeve. He did not give it to Noah. He gave it to Charlotte. "This belongs in your records," he said. Outside counsel approved returning a certified copy. The original remains preserved as evidence. Charlotte accepted it. Noah approached with flour on his shirt. Are you Ethan? Yes. The judge says you are my father. Yes. Noah pointed toward the antique mixer. Mom says that machine got called a baby. Ethan looked at the mixer, then at George. I owe that machine an apology too. George did not smile, but Noah did. They decorated 3 cookies. Ethan's icing lines were terrible. Noah corrected him with great seriousness. After 20 minutes, Noah asked, "Why did you not come find me?" Ethan had prepared the answer with Elaine. I believe false things about your mother. Someone also hid the letter that told me you were born and asked me to take a test. But I had other ways to ask questions, and I did not use them. I was afraid of learning I had been wrong. That was my failure, not yours. Are you still afraid? Yes. Then why are you here? Because being afraid does not excuse leaving anymore. Noah considered this, then returned to his cookie. The meeting ended on time. Ethan did not ask for extra minutes. In the parking lot, he found Martha waiting in her car. She had attended only to deliver documents to outside counsel and had no reason to speak with him, but he approached. You were right, he said. About what? My urgency was not his emergency. Martha closed her folder. Remember it when you want progress faster than he does. A week after that first meeting, Charlotte asked to speak with Martha. They met at a quiet table in the bakery before opening. Martha arrived without company counsel because the lawyers had approved a limited personal conversation about how the document was found. Did you know what the letter would do? Charlotte asked. No, Martha said. I knew it had been deliberately misfiled. My job was to preserve it and report the facts. Were you afraid of losing your position? Martha stirred her coffee. At my age, fear changes shape. I was less afraid of losing a title than of retiring with the knowledge that I had protected one. Charlotte looked toward Noah's small apron hanging near the kitchen. For years I wondered whether I should have fought harder. You sent the letter. You kept records. You raised your child while facing a company that had more money and information than you did. Do not use what we know now to prosecute the exhausted woman you were then. The words reached a place no legal order had touched. Charlotte had spent 5 years judging herself for not filing sooner, calling more often, or forcing Ethan to listen. Martha reminded her that responsibility belonged first to the people who had hidden, ignored, and distorted the truth. Before leaving, Martha bought a loaf of rye bread at full price. No corporate discount. Charlotte asked. I have seen what happens when vendors and executives become too friendly, Martha replied. For the first time that morning, Charlotte laughed. Ethan began paying support according to the court process and covering agreed medical expenses. He also offered to purchase the bakery building so Charlotte would never face another rent increase. She refused. That would make my livelihood dependent on your ownership, she said. No, he offered a no-strings grant. No, he finally asked. What would be useful? Pay what the court requires. Show up when scheduled. Do not solve problems I have not asked you to solve. It was harder for Ethan than writing a large check. He followed the instruction. The corporate investigation revealed that Vivien's manipulation of Charlotte had served 2 purposes, removing her influence and concealing the vendor scheme. Regulators and prosecutors received preserved evidence through counsel. Civil litigation followed. Months later, Vivien faced formal charges related to financial and records misconduct. The allegations were decided through legal proceedings, not through a family court judge. Mercer Holdings pursued recovery of funds and changed its mail, access, and whistleblower systems. Ethan stepped aside as chief executive while the investigation continued. The board appointed an interim leader. He accepted responsibility for concentrating too much authority in one chief of staff and for ignoring compliance warnings that seemed inconvenient. Martha was asked to become interim chief integrity officer. She accepted on one condition. I report directly to the independent board committee, she said. Not to you. Ethan agreed. He also asked whether the company could publicly honor her for finding the letter. No, Martha said. Improve the system. Do not turn me into a campaign. At the bakery, Ethan's relationship with Noah developed through ordinary tasks. He learned to arrive before closing and sweep floors. He attended a school reading day after Noah invited him. He kept his phone in the car during visits. He learned that Noah loved astronomy, feared dogs, and slept with a toy owl named Professor. One Saturday, Ethan missed a visit because a flight was canceled. He called before the scheduled time, offered a video call, and let Charlotte decide whether to reschedule. Noah was disappointed. "Is this how disappearing starts?" he asked his mother. Charlotte did not protect Ethan from the consequence. "We will watch what he does next." Ethan took a train overnight and arrived the following morning, exhausted but on time for the rescheduled breakfast. He did not present the journey as heroic. "The flight was canceled," he said. "I found another way." Noah nodded. "Good." Trust advanced one ordinary decision. George remained cautious. During one visit, he asked Ethan to help repair the antique mixer. They worked in silence until Ethan said, "I should have listened when you brought me the invoice." "Yes. I thought you were defending Charlotte because she was family." "She was family. She was also right. I treated loyalty as bias." George tightened a bolt with his stronger hand. People who do not want the truth often call love irrational and fear practical. Ethan looked at the machine. "Do you believe people can be repaired?" George shrugged. "Machines have parts. People have habits. Habits can change if the person stops admiring the apology and starts doing the work." The mixer started with a deep mechanical hum. "Good work left in it," Noah said from the doorway. George looked at Ethan. "We will see." Charlotte did not reconcile romantically with Ethan. He once asked, several months into the parenting plan, whether she could imagine dinner together without lawyers, therapists, or Noah. She answered with care. "I can imagine peace between us. I can imagine co-parenting. I cannot promise romance because you are improving. Improvement is what Noah is owed, not a price for receiving me back." Ethan accepted the boundary. Charlotte had spent years building a self that was not organized around his return. She owned the bakery with George, employed 9 people, and served on the neighborhood business council. Her life was not a waiting room. A year after Box 417 was opened, Noah spent his first afternoon alone with Ethan at a science museum. The parenting plan had expanded gradually with Elaine's recommendation and court approval where required. Ethan carried emergency contacts, allergy information, and a schedule Charlotte had written. He followed it without calling it controlling. At the planetarium, Noah leaned close during the dark presentation. "Do stars disappear?" he whispered. "Some do. Can we still see them after?" "For a while. Their light takes time to reach us." Noah thought about that. "Is the old light like a memory?" "Yes." "Can new light come too?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I hope so." When they returned, Noah ran to Charlotte and described every exhibit. Then he turned back. "Bye, Dad." The word was casual. That made it more powerful. Ethan smiled but did not turn it into a scene. "Good night, Noah." Charlotte saw the restraint and trusted it more than tears. The legal and corporate cases continued beyond the family's emotional milestones. Some claims settled. Some records remained confidential. Vivien's attorneys challenged parts of the evidence. The company recovered funds and paid penalties related to control failures. Life did not wait for a perfect final verdict. Martha eventually retired at 66. On her final day, employees gave her a framed photograph of Box 417. She looked at it and said, "That is a terrible picture." Ethan attended the reception but did not speak unless invited. Martha pulled him aside. "What did you learn from the letter?" she asked. "That someone I trusted hid the truth." "That is the first answer." Ethan corrected himself. "I learned that I had built a life where one person controlled too much information, and I accepted convenient summaries instead of original facts. I learned that being deceived does not erase the choices I made afterward. And I learned that a child should not have to heal an adult's shame." Martha nodded. "Better." Before leaving, she gave him the duplicate box index card. "Keep this somewhere visible." "Why?" "To remember that systems fail where people stop asking why 2 records have the same number." Ethan placed the card in his home office beside Noah's first drawing for him. 4 figures standing around an enormous mixer. George was holding a wrench. Charlotte held a tray. Noah stood in the center. Ethan was at the edge carrying a broom. The placement was accurate. On Noah's 8th birthday, the bakery closed early for a party. Ethan arrived before sunrise to help prepare. George gave him responsibility for the rolls. "This is a test," Ethan said. "No," George replied. "A test has a result. This is work." Ethan followed the recipe, waited for the dough, and resisted the urge to increase the oven temperature. The rolls came out uneven but good. Noah took one bite. "Better than your cookies." "That is a low bar." Charlotte smiled. After the guests left, Noah brought out a small wooden box. Inside was a copy of the courier receipt from Charlotte's letter, which she had saved with the family records. He was old enough to know a simplified version of the story. "Mom says this proves the letter got there," he said. "It proves it reached the building," Ethan replied. "Why did nobody bring it to you?" "Someone chose to hide it." "Why did you not ask again?" "That was the harder question. Because I preferred the answer that protected me from being wrong. I had money, lawyers, and investigators. I could have searched. I did not." Noah closed the box. "I am glad Ms. Martha searched." "So am I. Do you think one letter changed everything?" Ethan looked toward Charlotte and George. "It changed what I knew. What changed our lives was what people did after finding it. Martha protected the evidence. Your mother chose a legal process that protected you. The judge established my responsibilities. Your family set boundaries. I kept coming back. A document can open a door, but people decide whether to walk through it honestly." Noah seemed satisfied. The next morning, Ethan returned to the bakery and found George sitting alone with coffee. "He asked good questions," George said. "He usually does. Children eventually ask the question adults avoided." Ethan poured coffee. "Do you forgive me?" George looked at him over the cup. "I no longer expect you to disappear. That is more useful than my forgiveness." It was not the warm answer Ethan might once have wanted. It was the honest answer he had earned. Years later, Bennett's Bakery opened a second location. Charlotte financed it through a community bank and retained control. Ethan attended the opening as Noah's father, not as an investor. Martha cut the ribbon because Charlotte insisted the person who opened Box 417 deserved to open something joyful. Martha protested, then accepted. Noah stood between Charlotte and Ethan. George, now walking with a cane, complained that the new ovens had no character. The crowd laughed. No one mentioned Vivien. No one displayed the certified letter. The family did not build its future around the woman who tried to destroy it. That may be the most important ending of all. The hidden letter exposed a scheme, established that Charlotte had sought the truth, and forced Ethan to confront his failure. But the letter did not make Charlotte dependent on him. It did not make Noah trust him. It did not repair corporate controls or restore lost years. Those outcomes required law, boundaries, professional care, financial responsibility, and repeated human choices. Ethan once believed information gave him control. Box 417 taught him something different. Information creates responsibility. The more power a person has to verify a claim, the less excuse that person has for choosing ignorance. Charlotte never needed a courtroom to declare her dignity. She needed a process that recognized Noah's rights and prevented wealth from deciding the pace. George never needed revenge. He needed evidence that Ethan could stay when staying became inconvenient. Martha never needed public praise. She needed the records system corrected so the next hidden document would not wait 5 years for an honest person to notice it. And Noah needed what children have always needed. Adults who told the truth in language he could understand, protected him from public spectacle, allowed him to love more than one person, and never asked him to erase the past in order to accept the future. That is how Ethan Mercer finally became a father. Not when the DNA report confirmed biology. Not when the court entered an order. Not when a corporate investigation proved Vivien had hidden the letter. He became a father in the bakery before sunrise, sweeping flour from the floor, waiting for bread to rise, and returning week after week without demanding that anyone call the repair complete. If this story stayed with you, tell us in the comments which person changed the outcome most: Charlotte, George, Martha, or Noah. Subscribe for more original stories about hidden truths, family courage, and second chances earned one honest action at a time.